The 1972 Queen's Birthday Honours were appointments to orders and decorations of the Commonwealth realms to reward and highlight citizens' good works, on the occasion of the official birthday of Queen Elizabeth II. They were announced in supplements to the London Gazette of 23 May 1972. At this time, honours for Australians were awarded both in the United Kingdom, honours on the advice of the premiers of Australian states, and also in a separate Australia honours list. Recipients of honours are displayed here as they were styled before the new honours. United Kingdom. Life Peer Baron Brigadier Sir Bernard Edward Ferguson, CMG, CVOD, SOO, BE for Public Services. Sir Harold Samuel, for Public and Charitable Services. Privy Councillor the Right Honourable Charles Frank, Baron Byers OBE, Leader of the Liberal Party, House of Lords. Rodney Graham Page MBE MP, Minister for Local Government and Development. The Honourable Billy Mackie Snedden QC, Treasurer for the Commonwealth of Australia. Sir Burke St John Trent CBC, VO, Secretary of the Cabinet. Knight Bachelor Alan Ivor Baker CBE, Chairman, Baker Perkins Holdings Limited. For services to export. Donald James Barron, Chairman, Rowntree Macintosh Limited. For services to export. Derek Harold Richard Barton Hoffman, Professor of Organic Chemistry, Imperial College of Science and Technology, University of London. Professor Misha Black OBE, for services to industrial design. Paul Elmore Oliver Bryan DSOMC MP, for political and public services. John Lowy Burgess OBE, TD, for public services in Cumberland. Sidney Morris Caffin CBE, for charitable services. William Mosca Carter, President, the Law Society. The Right Honourable Frederick Vernon Caulfield MP, for political and public services. Colonel William Robert Crawshay DSOE, RD, TD, DL, for public services in Wales. Martin Davies CBE, Director, National Gallery. Donald MacLeod Douglas MBE, Professor of Surgery, University of Dundee. Professor Kingsley Charles Dunham, Director, Institute of Geological Sciences and Foreign Secretary of the Royal Society. Ernst Hans Joseph Gumbrick CBE, Professor of the History of the Classical Tradition, University of London. John Ritchie Inch CVO CBE QPM, Chief Constable, City of Edinburgh Police Force. William Johnston Keswick, Director, Bank of England. Anthony Carey Lewis CBE, Principal, Royal Academy of Music. Patrick Arthur Macquarie, for public services in Northern Ireland. Peter Thompson Menzies, Chairman, Electricity Council. Richard Anthony Mayers, Head of Business Team, Civil Service Department. Edward Henry Nichols, TD, Town Clerk, City of London. Montague Ilted Pritchard CBE MC, Chairman, Perkins Engines Group Limited. For services to export. Leonard Redshaw, Assistant Managing Director, Vickers Limited. For services to export. William Reed CBE, for services to the North East. James Maud Richards CBE, for services to architecture. Sidney Thomas Franklin Ryder, Chairman and Chief Executive, Reed International Limited. Colonel Geoffrey Peter Shackley CBE MC, TD, Chairman, Executive Council, County Councils Association. Robert Edward Graham Shillington CBE, Chief Constable, Royal Ulster Constabulary. John Arthur Stallworthy Nuffield, Professor of Obstetrics and Gynecology, University of Oxford. Andrew Stephen, Chairman, the Football Association. Professor Michael Meredith Swan F.R.S., Principal and Vice-Chancellor, University of Edinburgh. John Naked Taylor OBETD DL for Political and Public Services in Yorkshire. Lieutenant Colonel Geoffrey Carlton Astwood CBED, Speaker of the House of Assembly, Bermuda. The Honourable Gilbert Alexander Cooper CBED for Public Services in Bermuda. The Honourable John Anthony Holt Saunders CBED, SOMC, JP for Services to Banking in Hong Kong. Australian State of New South Wales Arthur Thomas George, for services to the Australian Greek community, universities and sport. George Mervyn Gray CVOC, Under Secretary and Permanent Head of the Premier's Department and Secretary to the Cabinet. John Hedley Douglas Marks CBE for services to hospitals and the community. State of Victoria the Honourable George Oswald Reed QCMP, Attorney General and Chief Secretary. State of Queensland the Honourable Alan Roy Fletcher MLA, Minister for Education and Cultural Activities. Councillor James Graham Walker MBE of Longreach, for community services, particularly in the field of local government. State of Tasmania the Honourable Mr. Justice George Hunter Crawford, Senior Queen Judge of the Supreme Court of Tasmania. Order of the Bath. Knight Grand Cross of the Order of the Bath General Sir John Anthony Jervis Reed KCBC, BED, SOMCA, DC, Late Infantry, Colonel Commandant the Light Division, Colonel Commandant Small Arms School Corps, Colonel Commandant Army Catering Corps, Air Chief Marshal Sir Frederick Rosier KCBC, BED, SOA, DC, Royal Air Force. Sir Arnold William France KCB, Chairman, Board of Inland Revenue. Knight Commander of the Order of the Bath Vice Admiral John Edward Ludgate Martin CBD, SC Lieutenant General John Houghton Gibbon CBO, BE, Late Royal Regiment of Artillery, Colonel Commandant Royal Regiment of Artillery. Air Vice Marshal Peter de Lacy Lieutenant CBD, FC, Royal Air Force. Edwal Vaughan Bew, CB, Second Permanent Secretary, Department of the Environment. Henry Gabriel Ware, CBH, M, Procurator General and Treasury Solicitor. Lieutenant Colonel the Right Honourable Sir Martin Michael Charles Charteris, K, CVO, CBO, BE, Private Secretary to the Queen and Keeper of Her Majesty's Archives. Companion of the Order of the Bath, Military Division Commandant Daphne Mary Blundell, Hon. ADC, Women's Royal Naval Service. Rear Admiral Hilary Charles Nicholas Goodhart. Surgeon Rear Admiral Rex Philip Phillips OBEQ, HS Rear Admiral Charles William Hames Shepherd CBE, Rear Admiral Alan Christopher Wyndham Wilson. Major General Ronald Edward Coker CBEMC, Late Royal Armoured Corps Colonel 17th 21st Lancers. Major General Henry Holland Evans, Late Royal Army Educational Corps. Major General Peter Howard Girling OBE, Late Corps of Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers. Major General Michael Stephen Hancock MBE, Late Royal Corps of Signals, Colonel Commandant Royal Corps of Signals. Air Vice Marshal Reginald Edward Wynyard Harland, Royal Air Force. Air Vice Marshal Frederick Desmond Hughes CBED, SOD, FCA, FC, Royal Air Force. Air Vice Marshal Brian Pashley Young CBE, Royal Air Force. Civil Division Albert Guirabanon, Chief Veterinary Officer, Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Food. Wilfred Burns CBE, Deputy Secretary and Chief Planner, Department of the Environment. Miss Joan Davis Cooper, Director of Social Services, Department of Health and Social Security. Leonard Richard Creasy, O.B.E., Director of Civil Engineering Development, Department of the Environment. Brian Arthur Cullum Duncan, C.B.E., QC, Judge Advocate General of HM Forces. Robert Fell, C.B.E., Secretary, Export Credits Guarantee Department. Gordon Neville Gadsby, Chief Scientific Officer, Ministry of Defense. Frank Dickinson Lawton, Solicitor, Department of Employment. Alan Lord, Deputy Chairman, Board of Inland Revenue. Norman Jordan Most, C.M.G., Deputy Secretary, Department of Health and Social Security. Edward Hurry Palmer, Controller of Defence Lands, Ministry of Defence. Sidney John Palmer, O.B.E., Deputy Director General, Ships, Ministry of Defence. Leo Klyadsky, Deputy Secretary, H.M. Treasury. William George Pottinger, C.V.O., Secretary, Department of Agriculture and Fisheries for Scotland. Patrick Shea, O.B.E., Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Education for Northern Ireland. Geoffrey Ward Stallybrass, O.B.E., Controller, National Air Traffic Services, Department of Trade and Industry. Order of St. Michael and St. George. Knight Commander of the Order of St. Michael and St. George Archibald Lawrence Patrick Cowan, C.M.G., T.D., Director and Secretary, Royal Geographical Society. Frank Dixie, C.M.G., O.B.E.F., R.S. Consulting Hydrogeologist to the Department of Water Development, Cyprus. John Nicholas Henderson, C.M.G., H.M. Ambassador, Warsaw. Charles Peter Hope, C.M.G., T.D., H.M. Ambassador, Mexico City. Sir Robert Lucien Morrison Kirkwood, for services to Anglo-Jamaican relations and to the sugar industry. Frederick Archibald Warner, C.M.G., H.M. Ambassador Designate, Tokyo. Companion of the Order of St. Michael and St. George John Lewis Jones, Assistant Secretary, Ministry of Defence. Jacob Jordan Watson, Consulate, British Embassy, Washington. Cyril Montgomery White, Q.C., Chairman, Foreign Compensation Commission, Foreign and Commonwealth Office. Lawrence John White, Assistant Secretary, Board of Customs and Excise. The Most Reverend George Appleton, M.B.E., Anglican Archbishop in Jerusalem. Ray Gordon Britton, lately British Deputy High Commissioner, Dhaka. Edward Peter Naylor Dehaan, O.B.E., Consulate, Foreign and Commonwealth Office. John Boyd Denson, O.B.E., lately British Charge d'Affaires, Peking. John Alexander Noble Graham, Consulate, Foreign and Commonwealth Office. Edward Firth Henderson, H.M. Ambassador, Qatar. Ernest Gordon Lewis, O.B.E., Governor, Falkland Islands. Reginald Lewis II, C.V.O., Consulate, Foreign and Commonwealth Office. Charles James Treadwell, H.M. Ambassador, Abu Dhabi. Australian States. State of Victoria. His Honour Judge George Leo Dethridge, Chairman of County Court Judges, County Court of Victoria. State of Queensland Frank Victor Sharp, O.B.E.D., of Brisbane, for his services to aviation and to the avocado industry. Royal Victorian Order. Knight Grand Cross of the Royal Victorian Order, the Right Honourable Charles John Viscount Cobham, K.G., C.M.G., T.D. Knight Commander of the Royal Victorian Order Brigadier Geoffrey Paul Hardy Roberts, C.B.E. Lieutenant Colonel Eric Charles William Mackenzie Penn, C.V.O.O.B.E.M.C. Commander of the Royal Victorian Order the Right Honourable Vere Drummond, Baroness Birdwood, M.V.O. Edwin Richard Corsten. Rear Admiral Anthony Davies, C.B. Miss Alice Ann Hawkins, M.V.O. Herbert Harry Hobbs, C.B. Albert Charles Edward Musk, M.V.O. Albert Edward Perkins, M.V.O. Commander, Metropolitan Police. Commodore Courtney Alexander Rives Shillington, C.B. BVRDDL, Royal Naval Volunteer Reserve. Member of the Royal Victorian Order. At this time the two lowest classes of the Royal Victorian Order were Member and Member, both with postnominals MVO. Member was renamed Lieutenant from the 1985 New Year Honours onwards. 4th Class Commander Lionel Armitage Byrd, Royal Navy. Sidney Schofield Campbell. Captain Ian Walter Farquhar, the Queen's Own Hussars. Surgeon Commander Philip Fulford, Royal Navy. Oswald Gillespie, Chief Superintendent, Metropolitan Police. The Reverend Canon James C. Moore, Dennis Mansell. Geoffrey Montague Fenwick Stowe. 5th Class Miss Mary Ashby. David Frederick Batson. Miss Marie Lillian Greiner. George Edward Wilson, Royal Victorian Medal. Bar to the Royal Victorian Medal Arthur Ernest Hennis. Royal Victorian Medal Thomas William Bell. Corporal of Horse Cyril Benjamin Blake. The Lifeguards. Sidney William Bloomfield. Michael Sylvester Donahue. Leslie Hoskin. Chief Marine Engineering Artificer David Leonard Moody. Miss Catherine Josephine O'Neill. Yeoman Bedgo Edward Cyril Parfitt, Her Majesty's Bodyguard of the Yeoman of the Guard. William Roper. Corporal of Horse Stanley Vorden, The Lifeguards. James Watt. Cyril Alfred Webb. Arthur Leslie Rickson. Order of the British Empire. Knight Grand Cross of the Order of the British Empire Sir Hamilton Edward de Courcy Howard, B.T. Lord Mayor of London. Dame Commander of the Order of the British Empire Unity Viola Mrs. Lister O.B.E. for Political and Public Services in London. The Right Honourable Bridget Horatia Baroness Plowden. For services to education. Knight Commander of the Order of the British Empire Vice Admiral Lewis Edward Stuart Holland Le Bailey, CBO, BE Lieutenant General Alan McNab Taylor, MC, late Royal Armoured Corps. The Right Honourable John Alexander Viscount Goshen O.B.E. for Political and Public Services. David Charles Beresford Holden, C.B.E.R.D., Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Finance for Northern Ireland, and Head of the Northern Ireland Civil Service. Colonel Arthur Noble, C.B.D., SOTD, Vice Chairman, Council of Territorial Auxiliary and Volunteer Reserve Associations. Frank Wood, C.B., Secretary, Ministry of Posts and Telecommunications. The Right Honourable Kenneth Gilmore Younger, lately Director, Royal Institute of International Affairs. Walter Frederick Pretterman, for services to agriculture and industry in Brazil. Gordon Arthur Ransom, C.B.E., lately Professor Emeritus, Faculty of Medicine, University of Singapore. Australian States, State of Victoria. The Honourable Gilbert Lawrence Chandler, C.M.G. M.L.C., Government Leader in the Legislative Council. Order of the Companions of Honour. The Right Honourable Arnold Abraham, Baron Goodman, for Public Services. Herbert Norman Howells, C.B.E., Composer. John Egerton Christmas Piper, Painter. New Zealand. Knight Bachelor. The Honourable Clifford Paris Richmond, of Wellington, Judge of the Court of Appeal. For outstanding services to the law. Reginald Charles Frank Savory, CBE, of Auckland. For outstanding services to local government and education. Order of the Bar. Companion of the Order of the Bath Military Division Lieutenant General Richard James Holden Webb, CBE, Chief of Defence Staff. Order of St. Michael and St. George. Companion of the Order of St. Michael and St. George Lawrence David Hickford, OBE, of Taranaki, for very valuable services to local government and the dairy industry. Shapton Donald Sinclair, of Waimea West, for very valuable services as Chairman of the New Zealand Apple and Pear Marketing Board. Order of the British Empire. Knight Commander of the Order of the British Empire Civil Division Malcolm McRae Burns CBE, Principal, Lincoln College, Christchurch, for outstanding services to the community. Commander of the Order of the British Empire Civil Division Harry Heaton Barker OBE, Mayor of Gisborne, for very valuable services to local government. John Dennis McGrath of Wellington, for very valuable services to the community. Eric Bruce Mackenzie of Wellington, for very valuable services as General Manager of the New Zealand Electricity Department. Tipi Tainui Ropi Haraiso of Auckland, for very valuable services to the Maori race. Officer of the Order of the British Empire Civil Division Whitford James Brown, for valuable services as Mayor of Porirua. Mrs. Phyllis Elaine Brucey of Days Bay, for valuable services to the arts. John Cowie of Lower Hutt, for valuable services to cricket. Samuel Jameson of Wellington, for valuable services as Director of the Animal Health Division, Ministry of Agriculture. John Lambert Kerr of Christchurch, for valuable services to cricket. Ralph McGlashan of Auckland, for valuable services to education. Amos Robinson Mocaig, for valuable services as Chairman of the Palmerston North Hospital Board. Juro Toman Mazarin of Auckland, for valuable services to the winemaking industry. Arthur John Nichol of Ashburton, for valuable services to trotting. John Philp QFSM of Invercargill, for valuable services as Chairman of the Southland Harbour Board. Alfred Jeffrey Scott MBE of Wellington, Manager of the National Film Unit. John Malfroy Stavely MC of Auckland, for valuable services to medicine. Samuel James Thompson of Leven, for valuable services to the community. Military Division Captain Samuel Fenwick Mercer, Royal New Zealand Navy. Colonel Russell Williden Range Colonels List. Group Captain William Robert Duncan MBE, Royal New Zealand Air Force. Member of the Order of the British Empire Civil Division Alan Searle Alsweiler of Invercargill, for services to the community. William Albert Edward Archer of Auckland, for services to the community. George Noble Bolton of Wanganui, for services to the community. Oswald Astley Cheeseman of Auckland, for services to music. Fletcher Roy Christian of Auckland, for services to rugby league football. Edward Walton Christiansen of Auckland, for services to the blind. William Augustus Christiansen of Whangarei, for services to local government. Mrs. Jean Clark of Wellington, for services to the community. Mrs. Geraldine Dora Davison of Geraldine, for services to the community. Alfred Gordon Freeman of Te Awamutu, for services to local government. James Hassel of Tokoroa, for services to the community. A Reverend Canon Beaumont Harold Pearard of Hamilton, for services to the community. David Stanley Radcliffe MM of Edgecombe, for services to the community. Hugh Douglas Ramsay of Dunedin, for services to the community. Donald Russell Robertson of Havelock North, for services to the community. Mrs. Muriel Bessie Fullerton Smith of Martin, for services to equestrian sport. Bertrand Charles Morris Spears of Murchison, for services to education. Miss Marian Watson Stewart of Tauranga, for services to the community. Norman Stephen Tankersley of Masterton, for services to local government. Military Division Warrant Control Electrical Mechanician Bruce Arthur Allen, Royal New Zealand Navy. Lieutenant Commander Alexander Georgianus, Royal New Zealand Naval Volunteer Reserve. Major Bruce Graham Jenkin, Corps of Royal New Zealand Engineers. Captain Brian Howard Martinet, Royal New Zealand Armoured Corps. Lieutenant and Quartermaster Donald Frank Williams, Royal New Zealand Infantry Regiment. Flight Lieutenant Sean Christopher Robinson, Royal New Zealand Air Force. Squadron Leader Peter Sidney Rule, Royal New Zealand Air Force. Companion of the Imperial Service Order James William Dempsey, Assistant General Manager, New Zealand Railways. British Empire Medal Civil Division Wilfred John Bradley, of Timaru. For services to the community, Miss Catherine Mary Carey, of North Auckland. For services to education, Mrs. Nairi Verna Dakers, of Waimaku. For services to the community, Miss Lily Alice Gall, of Gore. For services to nursing, Mrs. Maud Evelyn Hampton, of Tuatapere. For services to the community, Hugh Hunter, of Kati. For services to the community, Mrs. Edith Lucy Oldbury, of Carfia. For services to the community, Mrs. Olive Rose Violet Newman Parks, of Palmerston North. For services to the community, Paul Edward Quinville, of New Caledonia. For services as caretaker of the War Cemetery at Burrail, William Gordon Ainsley Ramsey, of Christchurch. For services as a personnel officer with the New Zealand Railways, Mrs. Patricia Ellen Isabel Rees, of Blenheim. For services to the community, Mrs. Ivy Mablethorpe, of Motueka. For services to the community. Military Division Temporary Warrant Control Electrical Artificer Anthony Charteris Black, Royal New Zealand Navy. Chief Petty Officer Electrician Stanley Haynes, Royal New Zealand Navy. Leading Medical Assistant Robert Peterson, Royal New Zealand Navy. Sergeant David Paul Beattie, Royal New Zealand Infantry Regiment. Sergeant Joseph Johnston, Royal New Zealand Infantry Regiment. Flight Sergeant Kenneth Seeley Cooper, Royal New Zealand Air Force. Flight Sergeant William Nevis House, Royal New Zealand Air Force. Royal Red Cross Associate of the Royal Red Cross Matron Helen Mackenzie, Royal New Zealand Nursing Corps. Air Force Crosswing Commander Mervyn William Hodge, Royal New Zealand Air Force. Queen's Commendation for Valuable Service in the Air Flight Lieutenant Harvey Hammersley, Royal New Zealand Air Force.